That's a very good question. There's part of me that feels like an imposter. That's probably true of most of the jobs I've done. When you're surrounded by incredibly talented people, and when you follow the mantra of surround yourself with people who are better than you, it's difficult not to start to feel something of an inferiority complex. When I accepted the job offer to become the CEO, and I gave it 3 days hard thought because I wasn't totally convinced I was the right person for our trustees, I wrote them a note which said something like, I'm not John. John was a wonderful ambassador, an operational leader. I'm more of a back office geek, and I probably will try to do things that way. And I've quickly learned a lesson that you can't. As a leader, you do have to stand up front. You do have to be an ambassador. And if you don't, then I think people are a little bit suspicious. In terms of my 3 tips, I think the first thing I'd say, and to coin a phrase from a very well-known book, start with why. We spent a lot of time self-diagnosing and imagining what the future of this state might be and what could be important about it. And that's where we came up with this vision of enhancing the lives of local people, of being the lifeblood of the local economy. Once you've articulated a very clear explanation of why you're going to do stuff, then we found that people really rally behind you, both inside and outside the organisation. And the big decisions you then have to make as to how you go about it become much, much easier because everyone's on the same page. So for us, starting with why was probably the most important tip we picked up, and we're very glad we started there as well. Our second tip, I think, despite the fact I've discovered I have to talk a lot, I still put listening and reflection down as one of the most important attributes, and people around me tell me that I'm good at that. I'm not so sure I see it that way. We are surrounded by immensely talented people, and especially at a place like Blenheim, people who care very deeply about the organisation and its community. And I've discovered over even 6 or 7 months, a lot of the answers to the questions I have about where we go and how we do it are in the heads of people around me here. So if I can actually shut up for long enough and listen to what people are saying and reflect on it, then I probably won't go far wrong. So that would be my second tip. My third tip, that's a tough one. I've spent a lot of time agonizing about the way I communicate. As I say, I start off as a shy person. Edit that one out. As I say, I start off as a shy person, not really wanting to stand up in front of people. I'm certainly more of a writer than I am a speaker. But I quickly discovered just how important it was to people around me that I did stand up and articulate a very compelling case and get people excited and be a bit of a salesman too. We do quarterly presentations to all the teams here, and I'll speak. I mean, most recently I spoke for nearly an hour to each team. If they knew just how long I rehearse those two, how often I replay the words and the pauses in my head so that I strike what I hope is exactly the right note and make it clear to each of them that each of these presentations is my most important presentation and I'm desperate to get it right, then I think they would all laugh at how long that process takes. But I realised just how rewarding that is and how much value you get back when people see you're going to make an effort. So those would be my 3 tips. Start with why, listening and reflection, and the power of really well-crafted communication. It would be remiss not to start with Winston Churchill, our greatest war leader, born here. And what I particularly admired about Sir Winston were 2 things. The first is this communication point. He wasn't really a very natural communicator, yet when you think back through the truly great motivational leadership speeches of the 20th century, they're all by Churchill. Some of the most amazing turns of phrase. He clearly spent a huge amount of effort on every last nuance of what he said, and he knew the importance of delivering it well. And I cannot think of any speaker who does it with such impact. He also was, if you read the histories of World War II, an amazingly broad planner. He was simultaneously planning for wars on 3 or 4 fronts, for secret resistance warfare, for new radical weaponry, for the political solution that would follow a war, and doing it all simultaneously. And I can't help but admire all of that. And I'd probably follow him, to stick with the Blenheim theme, with John Churchill, the first Duke, who changed the face of Europe by simply changing the rules of the game. He didn't have a superior army. The French armies of Louis XIV were undefeated in an era. But John changed the rules of the game. He changed the way his armies moved. They crossed Europe in record time by changing the way they, instead of raping and pillaging their way across Europe, which is quite tiring, sending scouts ahead with gold to buy food and lodging. So his soldiers marched, were fed warm meals, woke up at 3 a.m., were given a warm breakfast, and they marched in the cold of the morning instead of the heat of the afternoon. He crossed Europe in record time and destroyed the French armies. If they'd been expecting him in that time, it could have been a very different battle. So I think John rightly belongs up there with Winston as a key member of the Dream Blenheim Advisory Board. There's a local guy I rate very highly too, a very dear friend of mine called Mike Jennings, who runs the Jennings Business Parks. And he, in quite a small number of meetings, taught me a huge amount about the concept of servant leadership, that the leaders don't sort of demand from their people, but they actually serve their people and enable them to perform. And Mike runs an amazing business serving all of his tenants and all the businesses starting up in his parks. And it runs right through the way he runs that organisation. He and Paul and the rest of the team are brilliant. And so I think there's a huge amount to admire from Mike and Paul at Jennings. Number 4, I think Simon Sinek is an author I've read a lot of. He's the one who originally coined the idea of starting with why, and his vision for how a business had to start with a core idea, an explanation of everything they do, was very, very powerful. And when we saw how we could apply it to Blenheim, that was an elating moment where things just caught fire for us. And I think he's such a radically different thinker. I would want him on the board. Ditto someone like John Speedon Lewis, founder of John Lewis, who came up with a wholly different way of building a business, of sharing ownership with all the stakeholders, of planning for the very long term. And he did that in an era in which corporate enterprise was now firmly established. You were seeing the roots of communism, which was seen as evil, but he was brave enough to stand up and say, no, I have a middle path, and I can see very clearly that vision. And it's a vision that was clearly very powerful, because it's grown to something quite astonishing today. Finally, on my board would be a synthesis of a number of people I meet around Woodstock at the various hostelries and eateries. What they don't know about hospitality and a welcoming community isn't worth knowing. And I speak of the team at the Star, Becky and Naomi, who greet everyone, of the team at Hampers, who, Wayne, Jane and Gina, who make everyone feel completely at home from the moment they walk through the door, and Kasia and Xenia, who run the coffee shops. Woodstock is such a welcoming place, and we sit here wondering how we could emulate Disney and the quality of welcome they give, and I have a feeling the answer is actually much, much closer at home.